Buonasera, warmest greetings to all of you. I'm Joby Warrick, author of La Linea Rosa, and I deeply regret that personal difficulties have made it impossible for me to be with you in Milan today. I miss being with all of you in person, and I hope we can do it again in Italy very soon. As readers of my books know, I've spent most of my career as an author and journalist writing about national security on subjects ranging from espionage and conflicts to terrorism and weapons trafficking. The subjects are often dark, but they're always fascinating, and none more so than the one I will briefly describe in the next few minutes. The story I tell in La Linea Rosa has moments of tragedy and despair, but at its core, it's also a story of remarkable courage, resilience, and ingenuity. It's a story about nations divided, but also about nations coming together to achieve something for the greater good. It's the kind of thing we so rarely see anymore. For one shining moment, the impossible becomes possible, and we're reminded of what progress looks like. We're reminded that countries and their leaders can still accomplish something together, even for problems that seem intractable and almost without hope. The setting of my story is familiar for anyone who reads a newspaper. It's also one that's very timely, just now. And that's because exactly 10 years ago this month, in July 2011, a small unknown organization called the Free Syrian Army announced itself as a new military force that would use arms to defend Syrian protesters and defeat Syria's autocratic government. This small act was a turning point. It was the day that a bloody civil uprising in Syria became a full-blown civil war. And that war is now 10 years old, and the consequences are visible for the whole world to see. The suffering endured by the Syrian people is almost beyond comprehension. More than 600,000 people killed, cities destroyed, millions of people displaced by fighting that never stops, fighting that continues as we speak. And yet the consequences of this war extend far beyond Syria. Europeans have discovered many of these consequences, including the rise of new extremist groups that seek to commit terrorist atrocities in the cities of the West. A human tide of refugees that has inspired acts of compassion while also stirring up profound anxieties and fears in our societies in ways that have transformed our politics and even overturned governments. And yet, even as this was happening, another crisis loomed in Syria that few people knew anything about. This country, which is literally being torn apart by civil war, has within its borders a weapon of mass destruction. A real one. Hundreds of tons of highly sophisticated, extremely lethal chemical weapons, including nerve agents such as sarin, which rank among the deadliest substances ever made. There's enough sarin to fill swimming pools, and it's scattered around a country at war. These poisons are highly portable. They're an international terrorist dream, and they're potentially up for grabs, vulnerable in a country that appears to be at risk of a complete collapse. Now, the war itself proves to be a problem that's too big to solve. The international community cannot muster the will or the means to end the conflict. But here at last is a reason to act. The existence of these thousands of tons of loose chemical weapons is a potentially catastrophic threat to the Syrian people, but also to the entire world. And this is the start of what becomes a crazy and probable scheme to get those weapons out of Syria and destroy them, even as the war is raging, even as groups such as Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State are scheming to get these weapons for themselves. In the book, we meet a number of heroes who come forward to take on this challenge. And they include some of the bravest people you've probably never heard of. Include people like this man, Jokke Sällström, a Swedish medical professor who puts together a team of inspectors that bravely travels across a country at war to investigate these early reports that chemical weapons are being used. The team is a mix of nationalities, Italians, Germans, Arabs, Canadians, all volunteers for a dangerous job in a country where all sides view them with suspicion. They happen to be in Damascus when a horrific gas attack takes place in the outskirts of the city. Sarin is suspected. Hundreds are dead, many of them children. There's international pressure on this team to evacuate Syria at once, but Sällström and his team go in the opposite direction, toward the danger, toward the scene of the attack. And so they go into no man's land, without weapons, without military escorts, without security. They had barely begun their mission when their lightly armored car comes under sniper fire. Bullets smack against the car frame, the tires, the passenger windows, the windshield. The UN convoy quickly turns around and retreats to a nearby military post. The story finds Sellstrom and his advisors in a wrenching moment of indecision, trying to figure out what to do next. What do we do? Sellstrom asks his team. One of them speaks up without hesitation. We go in again, he said. What? Sellstrom is incredulous. If you don't go today, we will never go, comes the reply. They will know that they can frighten us and your mission will be over. Sellstrom thinks this over for a minute. He's being asked to send his team back down a road where a waiting sniper was merely the only threat of which they were absolutely certain. Okay, he finally says, we go in. So again, the vehicles line up, and this time they crash through no man's land as fast as their vehicles can go, only stopping when they get to the other side where the victims and the audience or the evidence is waiting to be encountered. Weeks later, a historic deal is struck. Diplomats agree that Syria must renounce its chemical weapons, and a separate international team is formed to oversee an act of disarmament unlike anything attempted before. The removal and destruction of Syria's entire chemical arsenal must happen, and all its factories for making chemical weapons must be destroyed. And because of the risks, the entire system must be dismantled at breathtaking speed in 9 months. And it will happen without a break in the war, while the fighting still goes on all sides. A new hero, a woman, emerges to lead this mammoth task. Here is Sigrid Kaag, a Dutch diplomat who was a mother of 4 children and also a leader with the toughness to go head-to-head with Syria's dictator and his military commanders. Sigrid discovers quickly that no one really thinks that Syria will give up its chemical weapons, and many countries would prefer to see the deal collapse. There are daily dangers, from mortar shells that fall into the courtyard of her hotel, to car bomb threats from al-Qaeda operatives who follow her. And despite it all, she succeeds. Because of Sigrid and her team, more than 90% of Syria's poisonous arsenal and production equipment is destroyed or hauled to a harbor to be taken out to sea. And yet, when it's over, Sigrid can't even bring herself to be happy about it. I hope the people of Syria can forgive us, she tells a friend. We didn't change their lives. But getting the weapons out of Syria is only half the struggle. Who will take these weapons and destroy them? The answer is no one. No country in the world is willing to open a seaport to a toxic cargo like this one. But in America, there is one man with an idea. This man, Tim Blades, gathers his team, and they invent a new machine that is capable of destroying sarin, and yet is small enough to be transported and operated anywhere on the world, even on a ship. Chemical weapons on a ship? The idea has many problems. Physically handling deadly nerve agents on the heaving deck of a cargo ship at sea is extremely risky, and everybody knows it. But in early 2014, it's the only option that remains for getting rid of Syria's weapons. And so an old ship called the Cape Ray is converted into the world's first floating chemical weapons destruction factory, and Tim and his team climb aboard to do the work. The Italian government, in a great act of political courage, agrees to offer the use of one of its ports at Gioia Tauro for 1 day, so the chemicals can be transferred from one vessel onto the second special ship, the Cape Ray. And so the historic mission begins. There are numerous problems. Equipment breaks down, parts and fuel run low. Protesters from Crete board ships to hunt for the Cape Ray. But somehow it succeeds. After 42 days of exhausting, dangerous work, the last barrels of poisons are hauled into the main deck. The machine performs exactly as it was designed to do, and the toxins are destroyed. This is not the end of the story, of course. The civil war grinds on. Syria cheats. First, it hides some of its chemical weapons so it can use them later. Then it finds new ways to terrorize civilians, including by bombing Syrian villages with ordinary chlorine, the common yet lethal industrial compound used to clean drinking water. Then the Islamic State, the terrorist group, draws inspiration from Syria's example and decides to try to make chemical weapons on its own. And yet, in the middle of all this, in spite of the suffering and the cheating and the setbacks, something remarkable was accomplished. 1,300 tons of chemical weapons are destroyed, in the middle of a war, in one of the most extraordinary feats of disarmament in recent history. It was not a perfect solution, but it was progress. And the region and the world are safer because of it. As the Cape Ray was concluding its work, one of the mission commanders types out a quick memo to his team, then tries to summarize what it was exactly that the ship and its crew had achieved. He wrote these words, and I will close with them. 5 months to create the machine, 66 days to outfit the vessel, 42 days to destroy hundreds of tons of serious, most dangerous chemicals at sea. The number we will never know, the number of men, women, and children who were saved. It was progress. Not perfect, but progress seldom is. Grazie mille. Thank you so much for your time. I hope to see you all in Italy again soon.